They both chose the same bar for the same reason. It was far enough away from everything that used to be theirs. The place was called the Lantern, though the flickering bulbs overhead did more to suggest hesitation than illumination. It sat on the edge of downtown like an afterthought. Brick walls, low ceilings, a jukebox that played songs no one admitted to loving. It was where people went when they didn't want to be found. Mara arrived first. She stood outside for a moment before going in, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. She looked the same. That was the strangest part. Same hair, same coat, same tired eyes. There was no visible mark for newly divorced, no scarlet letter, no ceremony of transformation. Just a document signed at 12:14 p.m., stamped and filed, declaring that 12 years of marriage were now officially over. Inside, the bar smelled like citrus cleaner and old wood. She slid onto a stool and ordered a whiskey sour, even though she usually drank wine. It felt like the kind of night that required a different version of herself. "Celebrating or forgetting?" the bartender asked. Mara hesitated. "Both," she said. He nodded as if that made sense. Across town, Daniel had asked himself the same question before pushing open the door to the Lantern. He hadn't planned on this place specifically. He'd driven aimlessly after leaving the courthouse, passing restaurants he used to love and streets that felt like someone else's memories. Eventually, he'd parked without thinking and found himself here. His divorce had been finalized at 3:02 p.m., 48 minutes after Mara's. 17 years, gone with the judge's signature and a handshake that felt more like a formality than closure. He stepped inside and paused, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. There was something conforming about the enormity of it. No one looked up, no one cared. Except, briefly, Mara. She glanced at him the way people do, quick, automatic, and then looked back at her drink. But something about him lingered. Maybe it was the way he stood there for a second too long, like he wasn't sure if he belonged anywhere yet. Maybe it was because she recognized that feeling. Daniel took a seat 2 stools down from her. "Whiskey," he told the bartender. "Neat." They sat in silence for a while, each aware of the others, but pretending not to be. The jukebox played something slow and aching. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly in the corner. Mara took a sip of her drink and winced slightly. "First one always tastes like regret," Daniel said. She turned to him, surprised. "Is that a universal rule or just your experience?" "Today, universal." There was a pause, then a small, involuntary smile. "Rough day?" she asked. He let out a quiet breath. "Depends on how you define rough." "Try me." Daniel lifted his glass, studying the amber liquid like it might offer answers. "I signed the papers this afternoon." Mara blinked. "You're kidding." "I wish." She laughed softly, not at him, but at the strange coincidence of it. "Me too." Now it was his turn to look surprised. "Today?" 2:14, she said. "Very official, very final." 3:02, he replied. "Guess I'm a little behind you." They exchanged a look, something unspoken passing between them. It wasn't quite camaraderie, but it was close. "To impeccable timing," Mara said, raising her glass. "To endings," Daniel replied, clinking his against hers. They drank. For a while they talked the way strangers do, carefully at first, circling around the obvious before inevitably landing on it. "What happened?" he asked eventually. Mara traced the rim of her glass with her finger. "Nothing dramatic, no big betrayal, no screaming matches. We just stopped choosing each other." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, that sounds familiar." "It's almost worse that way," she continued. "If something terrible had happened, at least there'd be a clear reason. But when it's just erosion," she shrugged. "You keep thinking maybe you can rebuild, even when you know the foundation's gone." She looked at him more closely now. 17 years, she guessed. He smiled faintly. Is it that obvious? You have that look. What look? Like you've been part of something for a long time and suddenly you're not sure who you are without it. Daniel considered that. And you don't? Mara hesitated. 12 years, she admitted. I got married at 26. I don't really remember what it's like to be just me. He nodded slowly. I was 29. It's strange, isn't it? How your whole identity can get tied up in another person. Husband, wife, us. And then one day, it's just not. They sat with that for a moment. Is this depressing? Mara asked suddenly. Daniel laughed. Probably, but it doesn't feel that way. No, she agreed, it doesn't. Another round appeared in front of them. Neither of them remembered ordering it. Tell me something, Daniel said. What did you think you'd feel today? Mara leaned back slightly, considering. Relief, maybe? Or devastation? Something big. She shook her head. But mostly, I just felt quiet. Yeah, he said, that's it. Quiet. Like the world expected a reaction, and I didn't really have one. Exactly. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. It's weirdly comforting when you get it, though. Same. The conversation shifted after that. They talked about smaller things. Favorite movies, terrible jobs they've had in their 20s, the places they'd always meant to visit but never did. It felt easier than it should have, like slipping into a rhythm neither of them had to force. At some point, Mara kicked off her shoes under the bar, tucking one foot beneath her. Daniel loosened his collar. The space between them shrank without either of them noticing when it had happened. Do you ever think, Mara said, that maybe the problem, it wasn't the relationship, but the version of yourself that you were in it? Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous thought. I know, she said, but I keep coming back to it, like maybe I outgrew that version of me. Or maybe I never really was her to begin with. He considered that. I think I got comfortable, he said finally, and then I stayed that way too long. By the time I realized something was wrong, I didn't know how to change without breaking everything. And now it's broken anyway. Yeah. They looked at each other, and this time there was something different in it. Not just understanding, but recognition. Two people standing in the same unfamiliar place. What are you going to do now? He asked. Mara laughed softly. I have no idea. It's both terrifying and kind of exciting. Same. Do you think you'll date again? She asked. Eventually, he said, but not right away. I think I need to figure out who I am first. Good answer, she said. What about you? She tilted her head. I don't know. Part of me wants to dive into something new just to prove I can, and part of me wants to be alone for a while. Those two don't have to be mutually exclusive, he said. No, she agreed, they don't. The jukebox changed songs again, something lighter this time. A couple near the corner started dancing, offbeat and laughing. Mara watched them for a moment. Do you miss it? She asked. Being married? Being part of something. Daniel thought about it. I miss the idea of it, he said. The reality, not as much. She nodded. Yeah, that's exactly it. He looked at her then, really looked at her. The way her hair fell slightly out of place. The way her eyes held both sadness and something brighter underneath. Do you want to dance? He asked. Mara blinked. Here? Why not? She hesitated, then smiled. Okay. They moved to the small open space near the jukebox. It really wasn't a dance floor, but no one seemed to mind. At first they kept a polite distance between them, swaying more than dancing, but gradually that distance faded. His hand found hers. Her other hand rested lightly on his shoulder. It wasn't dramatic or passionate. It was simple, easy. And that made it feel more significant than anything else. You're a decent dancer, she said. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, just pleasantly impressed. He smiled. You're not bad yourself. I had a lot of practice, she said, then caught herself. Sorry. Don't be, he said gently. It's part of the story. They danced through 2 songs, maybe 3. Time blurred a little. When they returned to the bar, their drinks were gone, replaced by fresh ones. Did we order these? Mara asked. Not that I remember. Then we should probably drink them. Seems only fair. They sat closer now, shoulders nearly touching. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Sure. Why this bar? Mara shrugged. It felt neutral, like it didn't belong to any version of my life. She looked at him. You? Same, he said. I think I just needed somewhere that didn't have any memories attached to it. And now it does, she said quietly. He held her gaze. Yeah. There was a shift then, subtle but undeniable. The air between them changed. Neither of them moved at first. Then Mara reached out almost absent-mindedly and brushed her fingers against his hand. He didn't pull away. Is this a bad idea? She asked softly. Probably, he said. Do you care? He shook his head. Not right now. Me neither. The first kiss wasn't rushed. It was hesitant, exploratory, two people testing the edge of something neither of them had planned. But it deepened quickly, as if all the quiet of the day had finally found an outlet. When they pulled back, they both laughed a little, surprised. Okay, Mara said, definitely a bad idea. Yeah, Daniel agreed, but still? They didn't overthink it after that. They left the bar together, stepping out into the cool night air. The city felt different somehow, less heavy, more open. Where are we going? Mara asked. Daniel hesitated. We could just walk. She smiled. I'd like that. They walked for a while, talking and not talking, letting the night stretch out around them. Eventually, walking turned into stopping turned into another kiss, and from there, the night unfolded naturally. It wasn't about replacing what they'd lost. It wasn't about starting something new. It was about being present for once, without expectations or history weighing them down. For a few hours, they were just two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. Morning came too soon. Mara woke first, the unfamiliar room disorienting for a second before memory settled in. Daniel was asleep beside her, breathing slow and even. She watched him for a moment, taking in the details, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his hand rested loosely on the bed between them. It felt peaceful, but also complicated. He stirred, blinking awake. Hey, he said softly. Hey. There was a pause, both of them aware of the unspoken question hanging in the air. What now? Mara asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. I don't know. She nodded. Yeah. They sat with it. We met 12 hours ago, he said. I know. And yesterday was... He trailed off. A lot, she finished. Yeah. Mara looked at him, searching his face. Do you want this to be something? She asked. He didn't answer right away. I want to be careful, he said finally. Not because I don't feel this, but because I do. She nodded. I get that. I don't want to rush into something just because it feels better than what we left, he continued. Me neither. But I don't want to pretend that this didn't happen. Definitely not. They both smiled slightly. So what are we saying? Mara asked. Daniel thought for a moment. Maybe we don't decide right now? She tilted her head. Just leave it open? Yeah, he said. See where we are in a week, or a month, or when things aren't so immediate. Mara considered that. It made sense. It was the responsible answer. And yet... Okay, she said, but can I ask one more thing? Of course. Do you want to see me again? This time he didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. She smiled. Good. They exchanged numbers, a small, almost ordinary act that felt strangely significant. As they got ready to leave, there was no dramatic goodbye, no promises they couldn't keep, just a quiet understanding. At the door, Mara paused. Same bar? She asked. Daniel smiled. Same bar. They went their separate ways, stepping back into lives that were suddenly undefined. Neither of them knew what would happen next. Maybe it would fade, becoming one of those strange, beautiful nights that only exist in memory. Or maybe it would grow into something neither of them expected. For now, it was enough that it had happened. Two strangers, one ending, and the possibility, just the possibility, of a beginning.